12 plants growing quietly in gardens and pantries across England contain more protein, weight for weight, than a joint of beef or a breast of chicken. That is not a trick of arithmetic. It is a fact that our grandparents understood and that most people today have simply never been told. I am Arthur Whitfield, and I grew up in the Yorkshire Dales, in a stone farmhouse where nothing was wasted and nothing was bought that could be grown, dried, or stored instead. My grandfather kept a kitchen garden and a row of grain sacks in the pantry, and he could tell you, without ever reading a label, which of his crops would keep a working man strong through a hard winter. These were not theories to him. They were daily practice, tested through lean years, through rationing, through seasons, when meat was either too dear or simply not to be had. I watched him feed a family of 6 on lentils, oats, and whatever grew along the hedgerows, and nobody in that house ever went without their strength. I am sharing what he taught me now because fewer and fewer people still know it. Somewhere along the way, protein became something you were told to buy in a plastic tray from a supermarket chiller. Meat became the only answer, and the plants that once fed working English families their strength were pushed quietly to the side, treated as poor man's food or forgotten altogether. The companies selling processed protein bars and shrink-wrapped cuts of meat have very little interest in reminding you that a handful of dried peas from your own garden can outdo their product on paper. I will not dwell on that. I simply want you to understand why this knowledge faded, so you can see clearly why it is worth bringing back. What you are about to hear is not a theory dressed up for a video. These are foods that fed English households through the Depression years and through the Second World War. When meat was rationed to a few ounces a week and families still needed to keep their strength up for long days of physical work, they worked then under real pressure, and they still work now. The first plants worth knowing are lentils and split peas. 100 grams of dried red lentils holds around 25 grams of protein, which sits above 100 grams of raw beef mince. In the Dales, lentils were kept in stone jars in the pantry because they did not spoil, and a pot of them simmered over the fire for an hour could feed a family for almost nothing. During the war years, the Ministry of Food encouraged exactly this kind of cooking, because pulses stretched further than meat ever could and kept working bodies fed through rationing. My grandfather soaked his split peas overnight in well water, then simmered them slowly with whatever vegetables were to hand. And that pot alone carried many a family through a cold week. But that is only the first part. The second pair of plants surprises most people who hear about them for the first time. Hemp seeds and pumpkin seeds, small as they are, carry a remarkable amount of protein for their size. 100 grams of whole hemp seed holds around 31 grams of protein, well above most cuts of meat you would find at a butcher's counter. Pumpkin seeds are not far behind, sitting around 19 grams per 100, and they were once dried on windowsills after the autumn harvest, so nothing from the pumpkin went to waste. Country families would toast them lightly over the embers of a dying fire and eat them through the winter evenings, a habit that cost nothing beyond the seeds already sitting inside a vegetable they had grown themselves. Keep watching, because what comes next is where Old English thrift becomes truly clever. Peanuts and soybeans, though not native to England, found their way into working kitchens through trade routes centuries ago and earned their place through sheer practicality. 100 grams of dry roasted peanuts carries about 25 grams of protein, matching or beating 100 grams of cooked chicken breast. Dried soybeans go even further, holding around 36 grams of protein per 100 grams, which is close to half again what the same weight of beef provides. Soybeans were soaked and boiled slowly, much like any other pulse, and while they were less common than lentils in the Dales, coastal towns with trading links brought them into wider use through the 19th century. The second method, working with chia seeds and quinoa, is where most people are genuinely surprised. Chia seeds hold around 17 grams of protein per 100 grams, and because they swell when soaked in water, a small spoonful goes further than most people expect. Once used to thicken porridge or bind a simple loaf, quinoa carries roughly 14 grams of protein per 100 grams in its dry form, which stands above most grains grown on English soil, and it stores for years in a dry jar without any special care at all. Neither of these was traditional to Yorkshire, but frugal households across the country adopted anything that stretched a meal further and kept its goodness intact through long storage, and both earn their place on this list for exactly that reason. But that is only the middle of what I have to share with you today. Oats and almonds come next, And here we return properly to home ground. Oats have fed the north of England for centuries, and 100 grams of dry oats holds around 13 grams of protein, which sounds modest until you remember that a single bowl of porridge in the morning could carry. A farm laborer through hours of heavy work in the cold, my grandfather ate porridge every single morning of his working life, made with nothing but oats, water, and a pinch of salt. And he would tell you plainly that no modern breakfast has ever matched it for lasting strength. Almonds, meanwhile, hold around 21 grams of protein per 100 grams, and a small tin of them kept in the pantry was once a country household's answer to expensive shop-bought snacks. They were bought sparingly, kept for special occasions, and long journeys. But weight for weight, they quietly outperform most cuts of meat on the butcher's slab. Now keep watching, because the final pair on this list is the one almost nobody expects, and it may be the most important of all. Green peas and spirulina close out this list, and between them they show just how far this old knowledge stretches. Fresh green peas are modest on their own, holding around 5 grams of protein per 100 grams, but dried peas concentrate that considerably, and were kept through the entire winter in sacks in the cold pantry, ready to be soaked and cooked whenever meat was scarce. Spirulina, a blue-green algae once considered strange and foreign, holds an extraordinary amount of protein, often cited above 50 grams per 100 grams dried, which puts it far ahead of any meat you could buy at any price. It was never part of English tradition in the way lentils or oats were, but its inclusion here proves a point my grandfather always made, which is that the natural world offers more strength than the shops ever let on. 12 plants, 6 simple habits, and not one of them required a supermarket or a delivery van to reach a Yorkshire kitchen table. I think about my grandfather often when I explain these things. He never worried about protein charts or nutritional labels because he simply knew, through years of watching his family stay strong on lentils, oats, and whatever the garden gave him, that the old foods carried everything a working body needed. What was lost was not the food itself, but the confidence to rely on it. And that confidence can be found again by anyone willing to look past the chiller cabinet and back toward the pantry shelf. If this has been useful to you, there are more methods where this one came from. I share a new one every day. The old ways are still here, quietly waiting. You simply have to know where to look.